Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Tom DeMarchi, the director. I'm here to introduce two of my favorite writers, Tod Goldberg and Darin Strauss. There's Tod, and there's Darin. What's up, guys?
How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. Thanks for joining us today, and I'm gonna do my spiel and then get out of the way so you guys can be funny and informative for our audience. No pressure.
So much pressure.
But both of you are so accomplished, and both of you have such a long bio. I don't want to miss anything, so I'm going to read what I wrote down.
Oh my gosh!
This is like the short version of what you guys have done.
Is that in shorthand? Also, did you have your stenography?
This is just how I scribble.
Write this all down.
Clear form.
But I will say this, and Darin might be sick of me telling this story, but I love telling this story because it's people are interested in how we even choose the presenters who come to the conference. People are always asking me, especially authors who want to be invited to the conference, are always asking me what happens, how do they get invited? It's terrible, yeah. Tell that to the nearly 900 people who are on the waiting list now who have queried me and send proposals to come down to the conference. And that's usually how it happens. It's usually either by recommendation or by word of mouth, or people sometimes send me emails and they say, hey, I'm an author, or their representative sends me an email and says, hey, I represent this author. I think he or she would be perfect for the conference. And so publishers oftentimes will send me books and say, here is someone that we think would be good for your conference. And I think it was in 2011, McSweeney sent me a copy of Darin's book called Half a Life. And it arrived right when I was sitting down for lunch. And Todd's looking for it on his shelf right now.
Literally right there.
and so, I was getting so many books at that time for some reason. There just wasn't enough time in the day for me to get through them all and to see, who would be a good pick. So, but it just happened to arrive right at lunchtime. And so I sat down and I said, okay, I'll just open this up and start reading it during lunch because I have the time right now. And I opened it up and I didn't get up until I finished it a few hours later. What's that?
You were asleep.
It was a very big lunch. It was a huge lunch. No meal that day. And so I immediately emailed Darin and I just said, hey man, this is what we're doing and I think that you'd be a perfect fit and I love your book. Would you be interested? And luckily he said yes. And he came down that year. And I think the next year I recommended Half a Life to the campus for the campus reading project. And then everybody on campus read it and Darin came back and he's been coming back every year since. And so it was just one of those perfect moments of fate where the book landed at just the right time and it was just the right opening and the right person. And I'm thrilled. And so now here it is nearly 10 years later and Darin's part of core faculty. And, he and I go back and forth I feel as if we're having an ongoing conversation about music for the last couple of years. But so that's how we got Darin and Tod. A few years ago, we had Gina Frangello and Rob Roberge come down, and they were terrific. And at the end of the conference, they said, you should really invite our buddy Tod Goldberg down. He'd be perfect for this. And I was already familiar with Tod's work, and I believe we were already friends on Facebook. And I loved his almost, like 4 or 5 times an hour, he does a Facebook update that is both hilarious and brilliant.
I was probably going through something. I don't know if it's every day, 4 times an hour.
No matter what time of the day I was logged on, it could be 3 in the morning and there's like 3 or 4.
Yeah, there's content.
He's going to update 4 or 5 times during this session. But then, again, so I invited Tod down and he said yes. And he came down in 2018 and the students loved him. And on the evaluation, a bunch of people said, please bring Tod back. So we're inviting him back and here he is. So I'm thrilled that you guys are associated with this conference. You make it a better event. And I'm just excited to be associated with you guys, or at least I am until now. We'll see what happens after this session. So with all that said, Tod is, I'm going to read my scribble here. Tod is a New York Times bestselling author of over a dozen books, including Gangsterland and Gangster Nation, and those are being developed into a series for Amazon. He also co-wrote the bestseller The House of Secrets with Brad Meltzer and a series of novels for the Burn Notice TV series. His most recent book is a collection of short stories titled The Low Desert Gangster Stories.
It just so happens to be right over my shoulder.
There it is. And that's coming out next year, right, in February?
Yeah, if we make it to February, it's coming out.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. I mean, it'll come out, but I might be living in Australia.
They still sell books in Australia. Tod is the founder and co-host of the podcast Literary Disco and the founder and director of the low residency MFA program at the University of California, Riverside. Darin Strauss has won tons of awards for his work, including a Guggenheim Fellowship, the American Library Association Award, and the National Book Critics Circle Award in 2011 for autobiography for the book I just talked about, Half a Life. He is the author of 4 novels, most recently The Queen of Tuesday, a Lucille Ball story, which I just moved to Colorado, so most of my books are still back in Florida, but this just came out, so I just ordered it, and it arrived a few weeks ago when it was first published.
And it is fantastic. Darin might not tell you this himself, but I'll tell you, I read it, and I absolutely loved it. One of the best books of the year.
That's what everyone's saying. That's what everyone's saying.
Great book.
Thank you.
He has also written an opinion column for Al Jazeera America and screenplays for Disney. And now I'm going to get out of the way and let you guys be funny and brilliant. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you at the cocktail hour.
Jesus Christ. Well, thank you. Yeah, that was amazing. But
Tom,
yeah,
it's a lot of pressure.
It's very good to see you. Although now I don't know. We have to be really good. I am in my mom's house. So I don't have any books here, but I have pictures of her other grandkids, not my kids.
That's not your childhood bedroom, though. That would be awkward.
No, that would be awkward. That would be weird.
You never want to sleep in your childhood bedroom with your wife and children in the same house.
No,
Freudian.
You never want to be having any kind of video interaction with another man.
No.
While you're in your.
So I'm in my home I live in Palm Springs, and I'm in the portion of my house devoted almost entirely to my ego, as you can see behind me.
Are those all your books?
Well, the wall's not big enough, frankly, Darin. So it's just sort of it's an examination of a career versus an entire.
But wait, so Tom mentioned 15 books.
Right.
Can we start at the beginning? When was your first book published? How did you get it published?
Oh gosh. So my first book came out in 2000. And so if there's young people watching, there used to be a channel called MTV. And they played music videos, which were moving pictures to sound. And in about 1998 or so, they started publishing books. And the first book they published was a little cult book that not a lot of people have heard of called Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky, which, of course, took over the world. And so, no problem. I slid right in as book number 2. And so that went great. So my first book was a novel called Fake Liar Cheat. It came out in 2000. Actually, it was the third book. The second book was actually a really good book called The Fuck Up by Arthur Nersessian.
Yeah, I remember that book.
Yeah, it's a great book. But before that, I had been working as basically a short story writer. Well, not working. I wasn't making any money. You can't go to the grocery store with a stack of Black Warrior reviews and just push it across and say, I'd like to get a steak with that. But I'd published a bunch of short stories. I'd lost some nice awards for the short stories. And so I wrote that book in 1997, 1998, when I was working for a a company that made infomercials. So for 2 years, I guess it was, I worked for a company that made some of the worst infomercials that have ever existed in the history of the world.
This is a low bar, because even a good infomercial is nothing anyone wants to watch. So
exactly, and I was an account executive at an infomercial company, which is like used car dealers are like, bro, have you thought about like getting a job as a postal worker? Like, there's got to be something else you can do. But so after I had, I'd spent some years writing short stories, I was writing infomercials. I wrote Fake Liar Cheat. It was rejected in 2 weeks by 30 publishers. And it should have been rejected by MTV as well, because the book isn't any good. And Publishers Weekly gave it one of the worst reviews I've ever seen in my entire life. But, actually having written and published a really bad book, that 16-year-olds still bought at the time, really forced me to focus more on my craft as I went forward. Right. I really had to up my game. Like, this is the thing I wanted to do. I had written a not very good book that had nevertheless been published, because they'll let you publish a bad book. Like, that will happen. But I got very lucky because a charming man named Weinstein bought Fake Liar Cheat for his little movie company called Miramax, to make into a movie that was, of course, never made. But they bought it to be a film for Cameron Diaz at the time. This is a very long time ago. It was 20 years ago. And basically, that really nice film deal that I got put me on the path to the career that I have now.
That's actually an incredible lesson for all the writers and wannabe, or wannabe is the wrong word, aspiring writers out there. It doesn't matter if your book's rejected by 30 publishers. You just need the 31st to say yes, and then you launch. I think that's super helpful to know. And also, your first book is rarely going to be your best. So, I think I think I mentioned this. Todd and I did an event recently, and I might have mentioned this there. So forgive me, Todd, if this is familiar to you. But the best lesson I ever got as a teacher was very early in my teaching career. I taught a writer. I probably shouldn't say who it is, although it's really a compliment. I didn't think she was very good as a student, and so I thought, oh, she's a really nice woman, but she's not a good writer. And then very quickly, she became a great writer. I realized, as a teacher, or even as a writer, it's wrong to say, oh, this person's good or that person's not good. It's really just a long process, a long trip. And so, I was seeing her at one point on her line of her journey, I guess, let's say, and then she very quickly became a great writer. So, I think that a friend of mine was saying this recently, the difference between writers who publish and other writers who give up is really rarely talent. It's that people like me and you, I think, can realize, oh, we wrote a shitty draft, I'm just going to make it better. Where a lot of people will write a shitty draft and they will say, I'm not a good writer, or I'm never going to get good. And so I think it's just realizing, okay, we're all going to write shitty drafts. We're all going to get better if we just keep at it.
Yeah, I think the ability to have persistence in the belief that you're going to do something good it's an admirable trait. Not to be thin-skinned, not like, no one likes to get bad notes on something. No one likes to be told that you need to go do a rewrite. Like, every time I write something, I'm pretty sure it's like, well, I probably should reserve whatever date the Pulitzers are being given out just in case, for this essay I just wrote for, AAA's magazine or whatever, which I just did, actually. But, and this is a conversation I have with my own students all the time, is like, the difference between us and them is we get back up off the mat. You get bad notes and you go and you rewrite and you self-evaluate and you do the hard work. And so, when I said that, like, that I'd written a bad book and I got bad reviews, I did, but it pissed me off because I knew I was better than that. And I just had the same experience like a week ago. I'd been working on a script and I got some hard notes on the script, and I knew that I hadn't given my best on it. And it pissed me off because the notes were right and it was my fault. It wasn't the reader's fault. It wasn't anyone else's fault. It was my fault. I hadn't done what I should have done. But that just made me like, I licked my wounds for a day, and then I bought a pie. I ate the whole pie, and then I got back to work. So what was your path? How did you get?
I want to stick with that for 1 second because that reminded me of something I saw that David Foster Wallace said. I never met him, but he was friendly with some people I know, and they said that he said right before Infinite Jest that this is the first book that I've given my all to. He said, I always held something back because I was afraid that if it didn't do well, I could always tell myself, yeah, well, that's not my best, so whatever. And so that was the first time he was brave enough to say, I'm just going to go for it. And if they don't like it, they're not liking my best.
Right.
And I think that there's, I actually also was recently given rough notes on a script. And I realized, oh my God, I've been teaching. I started teaching in 2001. My first book also came out in 2000. And then I started teaching 2001. In New York City, the week of 9/11, so that was kind of trial by fire. But yeah,
everyone gets an A on 9/11, right?
Yeah, I was like, I'm trying to figure it out, and all these kids from around the country coming to New York, and they're like, "What?" Anyway, but what was I going to say about that? But I think that I realized when I got these bad notes, oh man, I forgot how hard it is to be workshop because I've led a workshop for so long.
Right.
Toughen up, people. But then you get a bad workshop that messes you up for a day. But you have to, like you said, getting up off the mat is more important than inborn talent, than almost anything. Because I do believe that you can get really good if you just work at it. I think that people have this weird thing like writing can't be taught or it's all talent. But it's basically a lot of it's like a piano player. Like, you're not going to be a great piano player till you put in hours and hours at the keyboard, and then eventually you'll be good.
Right. So that's the only thing stopping me from basically being in the Thompson Twins is like.
Well, yeah. We'll talk about that later.
Well, that and the hair. Well, I remember when your first book came out in 2000 because I was traveling around the country on tour, and I'd see people buying your book. And then not buying my book. That's
really nice of you to
say. Todd, nice to see you. Have you read Chang and Ang? Like, Jesus Christ. No. But in my second book, there's gonna be Conjoined Twins. I promise you.
No, I remember similar things with Gangsterland. Everyone was talking about that book. But I once did a tour. Tours are gone now, so we can talk about it like the kinetoscope or whatever. But I remember doing a tour once, and the tour, so when you're a writer, they fly you to different cities, and someone drives you to the bookstore from the airport and stuff, and they call that person the escort. And my escort in San Francisco was Michael Chabon's mom.
Oh my God.
Who, typical Jewish mom, wanted to talk about her son, and he gave a lot of material. So everywhere I went, she was like, "Oh, it's so cute. You have 15 people here. Michael had 60 here yesterday." Or like, "This is where Michael read right before he won the Pulitzer. What have you done?" And I was like, usually you kind of feel.
My son wrote Mysteries of Pittsburgh in grad school.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, okay, I get it. I'm not Michael Chabon, but anyway, but yeah. So we both came out in 2000, but you have 15 books. I have 6 if you count a comic book. You have a lot.
You also have you have human beings.
I do have human beings. I have identical twin boys. So I wrote about Conjoined Twins, as you mentioned.
Daniels that look alike, but they're different ones over the course of 20 years. They just all look the same.
Well, that's the thing too. It is very hard to write when you have kids, I think, and when you teach. And so, how do you do? I mean, you teach. You mentioned you don't have kids, but you teach. You run a low res. You've got a podcast. How do you juggle all that?
It was easier when I was younger, for sure. But so essentially since 2008 or 9, basically, when I started writing Burn Notice, I've been writing, pretty much crime fiction. I sort of started out more literary fiction, but subsequent to writing Burn Notice and Gangsterland and Gangster Nation and House of Secrets and all these other books, I write commercial crime fiction. And the audience for commercial crime fiction essentially expects you to have a new book every 18 months. And if you don't have a book every 18 months, they think that you, I don't know what they think, but they always are like, oh, you're back. Like, well, I wasn't gone. I mean, I've been eating at the president every day. Did you not see that?
He's very upset about it too.
But so there's that expectation that I have that I have to turn out a new book pretty quickly, because that's what the genre expects. Literary fiction doesn't have that same sort of thought that it's normal, I think, in literary fiction to have 3 or 4 years pass before a new book comes out, because I think you got to go to therapy, you got to be angry at your mom, you got to figure out how to turn that into a novel about a drowning, whatever it might be. But for me, the juggling of all this stuff, having a graduate school at the University of California takes a tremendous amount of my time, but I really am able to bifurcate my day. Like, I can say, okay, from 10 o'clock in the morning until 1 o'clock, I'm going to do just student stuff. From 1:30 until 3:30, I'm only going to Google myself. From 3:30 until Rachel Maddow begins, I'm going to write crime fiction.
Right.
So I've become much more regimented in the way that I do work. I used to stay up all night writing, till 4 o'clock in the morning. But, I'm 49 years old. I don't want to stay up till 4 o'clock in the morning unless we're packing to move to Australia. I don't want to do that. And so, in fact, my writing pace has slowed down some over the years. So Gangster Nation came out in 2017. Well, actually, more like 2018 is the end of the year. And Low Desert is going to come out in February. So there's been a couple years in between books, but it was a choice to have the Low Desert come out in 2021 versus fall of 2020, for instance.
I've as you mentioned, I had a book come out recently. It's a really rough time now. Well, it's a rough time for everybody and everything, including books. And we made that call. They said, "Do you want to hold it till right after the election?" I said, "Definitely not right after the election, because everyone's going to be moving." And then,
my main audience of Jews will be leaving the country,
either by choice or we'll see.
Right.
But, Well, how did you get the burn notice thing?
I mean, that's
right.
I mean, well, you've taken weird jobs, right? Writing. Like what? And I'll tell you the bird notice thing after you tell. Like, what's the weirdest gig you took?
Well, I'm actually maybe taking a weird gig now. So after my last book came out, a guy I grew up with, I didn't know him really, but he was in my town, and he contacted me and he said, "I have a story for you." And, people always say that. I'm sure you get that all the time. So I was sort of skeptical. And it turns out that his family is the family of the mobsters in Goodfellas, not Henry Hill, but and he said, "Do you want to write the prequel to Goodfellas?" And I said, "Yeah, totally." But here's the weird. So I met 2 days ago with a made man, and it was really interesting. Who talked about killing people. It was really interesting. But the weird thing is, my publisher is like, "I don't know, is that a good idea? It's an old movie." I'm like, "That is a guaranteed bestseller." But they're like, "Maybe just go back to doing literary fiction." And I was like, "No, don't you see that?" So anyway, we'll talk about that later. But I'm going through this weird thing right now.
Darin, this is an opportunity for you and me to work together.
That would be really fun, wouldn't it?
A Tod Goldberg Darin Strauss Goodfellas joint.
Wait, you're already putting yourself first. Okay, that's cool.
I mean, it's alphabetical.
Yeah,
Wow, that's amazing. And weird stuff like that happens. You'll get a call and someone will say, "Oh, this is a strange thing." And that was sort of what happened with Burn Notice. The creator of the TV show Burn Notice, Matt Nix, was an old friend of mine. I hadn't seen him in years, but we share a common, very good friend. And this was in 2007.
Okay.
And Burn Notice had just had its first season on television. Penguin Putnam had come to him and said that they wanted to turn it into a series of novels. And he said, "Oh, the perfect guy to do it is Tod Goldberg." And so then they contacted me and said, "Matt wants you to write Burn Notice books. Are you interested?" And I was like, well, I've never written a crime novel before, but I know that I want to. How could it go wrong writing it for an audience of millions already? Let me put my foibles and lack of talent on display immediately. But the cool thing was, so I wrote 5 of them over the course of 3 years. They're very short. They're 285 pages. But it really
did they give you any guidance, or they just said write whatever you want based on these characters?
Yeah, just based on the characters. And Matt and I always had a really great working relationship. And we sort of have the same approach to crime, which is, really highly influenced by Donald Westlake and Elmore Leonard. Like that's Burnt Notice was basically an Elmore Leonard novel. And so Matt and I would meet, and before I'd write each book, and he'd tell me like, all right, this is what season 3 is going to be about. Don't write about this or this or this. I'd say, all right, I want to write about this. And he'd say, great. I'd spend a couple days in the writer's room just to sort of get the tone of what the season was going to look like. And then I'd essentially write a book that I thought could be a standalone episode in that season. And it was great fun. And I could have written those books for the rest of my life. They asked me if I would just keep writing them forever. But after writing 5 of them, really that was like my graduate school in mystery fiction, was writing those Burnt Notice books. And I was ready to go and write Gangsterland, which was a story that I'd had in my mind for a long time, because it was based on a short story of mine that had come out in 2009 called Mitzvah. And so I decided, all right, I'm going to spend, in sort of a David Foster Wallacean thing, I'm going to spend the next 2 years writing the best thing I've ever written. Every single day, I'm going to try to hit the ball out of the park. And that's what I did. And it changed the course of my life.
That's amazing. So that's a great story. Yeah. And now Netflix is making it into a show, right?
Amazon owns
Amazon.
They're developing it right now. We're hoping for good news sometime soon. If something happens, you'll have to go through my people to have any more conversations with me.
Okay, good. Well, I feel like we're having too many conversations anyway, so it'll slow down the pace in a way that I find beautiful. So are you writing the pilot? How's that work?
Someone else is writing the pilot. I would tell you who, but I'm literally contractually not allowed to say.
Is it someone we would know?
Yes.
That's exciting.
Yes, it's a great team is working on this project, and we're hoping for good news sometime very soon. It's been something that I've been working really closely on this summer, and so hopefully it comes to pass. And basically, I'm at the point right now where, and I know you've experienced this yourself, where I'm either going to experience great joy or profound, crushing sadness.
So what happened with me is, so I'll tell the story. So I don't know how you live in LA. I mean, I love California, but it's just a crazy place, right? So I go out there. My first ever. These are my first 2 Hollywood meetings I've ever had. 30 years old. It's late 2000. I'm very excited. I meet this guy. He's like, I love this book. He jumps up. He's like, let's make a movie. And I was like, okay, great. Last I heard from him. 20 years. Never talked to him again. I left that meeting thinking I was about to make a movie with this guy. And then the second meeting I had, so the book is Chang and Ang. It's about conjoined twins from Siam. That's why they're called Siamese twins. So I meet this guy, and he's like, I want to make this movie. I said, great. And he said, there's one problem. They're Asian and they're attached. That's 2 problems, and that's the whole book. Really, it's the entire book. So that was it. That was like, I don't know if you want to make like a Chris Tucker, Jackie Chan movie or something. So anyway, so
there's one problem. They're Asian and they're attached.
Yeah, it was like he was racist and
couldn't count.
And he couldn't count. But so then I did sell it to Disney and wrote the script and worked with the director Julie Taymor, and it was and this is so funny. So the president of Disney talked about it in Variety as being the big Oscar push for 2004 or whatever. So my agent was like, I never say this, but it's definitely going to happen because the president of Disney just said in Variety it's his big Oscar push. 2 days later, he was fired. And they were like, what can we get off like this?
I'm sorry, Darren. I had Harvey Weinstein bought a book of mine.
Yeah. So, yeah. So the crushing, so I know the crushing sadness. It was literally Friday she said that, and then Pearl Harbor came out and was a bomb, and he was fired on the Monday. And I was like, maybe it's not so bad. Let me see what they say about it. And they were like, the first thing we're gonna get rid of is okay.
We're gonna purge anything with conjoined twins. What do we?
Yeah.
Well, it looks like we're supposed to take some audience questions here. Let's see what we got. Oh gosh, there's a ton here in the comments.
Okay. I got you. Oh gosh, I didn't see it. Okay.
Let's see here. Katie though says, "What inspired you to write, and do you still think back on that inspiration throughout your career?" You can take that one, Darin.
I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel like I'm just not that good at anything else. So I don't know what I mean. I spent a lot of time learning how to write, and so I don't know if I could do anything else that well right now. It's not like I could quit and become a lawyer or something.
Right.
I mean, I remember seeing Kobe Bryant interviewed, and he said, someone said, what makes Kobe Bryant, which is a dumb question, but he took it really seriously. He seemed like a thoughtful guy. And he said, well, I did the thing you're not supposed to do. I put all my eggs in one basket. And I said, no one's going to be a better basketball player than I am because they worked harder than I did. So he said, if I didn't make it as a basketball player, I would have been fucked. And I feel like that's kind of me now. Like, I don't know how to do you could ask my wife. There's very little I can do. So, I don't know. What about you, Todd?
And we should bring our wives in for the
I could bring my wife and my kids and my kids. Like, it could be a whole thing.
Well, for me, writing is our family business. My mom was a journalist. My dad was a TV newsman. My brother writes books. My sisters have written books. Between me and my three siblings, we've published 120 books or something like that.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's a ton. And so unlike, I think, a lot of people where it seemed like writing a book and having a career was like a pipe dream, it was just sort of the thing that happened in our family,
Yeah.
So I think that freedom to believe that I could do this thing that I really wanted to do, and that it was attainable, and that there was, a life in there. Not having that doubt really played a big role. But I know the thing that made me want to write, which is that I am profoundly dyslexic, and I couldn't read or write until I was about 11 years old. And I remember, I've written about this 1,000 times, but I remember vividly, or talked about it 1,000 times. I remember vividly being at a doctor's office and an ophthalmologist and being in that machine, and him telling my mother that I would never read or write above a 4th grade level. And my mom lost her shit and was like, that's not happening.
Wow.
But that seed of "you will never do it," that I can hear that guy in my head. I can smell the gum in his mouth still. Like, that's the thing when I sit down at this computer, this very computer that I'm staring at now, and get to work. That's the thing. I was like, I'm going to show you, despite what Goodreads says, that I can write above a 4th grade level.
No, but did you ever send him your book? You should have sent him the book.
I'm sure he's dead now because I sent a guy to kill him.
But wait, so that's an important thing that people are too classy to talk about. But there is a spur that a lot of us have. Like, I remember when I went to grad school, and I was not the person that anyone would have picked to get published in my class. And I was dating someone in the program, and she was like, I was writing Chang-Ang, and she was like, I was even talking to agents and trying to get it sold, and she was like, I think you should just maybe try playing guitar instead. And I just don't think you have it. And so I think about that a lot too. I'm like, all right. And then what she did, that woman did contact me after Half a Life and said, oh, I love that book. And I was like, see,
Yeah. I mean, a lot of things that I do in my life are because of spite. But also, like, I'm not unlike Kobe Bryant, and this will be the only time in history people will be like Goldberg, not unlike Kobe Bryant. Not unlike Kobe Bryant, like it's all I ever wanted, and it was going to be what I was going to do, other than teaching. Like, I knew very early on that I wanted to be a professor, and I wanted to teach. And it might just be because, like, I read a separate piece or whatever when I was 13. I was like, I'm going to inspire young men to break their legs and be bad to their friends or whatever, but I love to teach. I really do. It's something I'm as passionate about as the writing. But I think I wouldn't be as good a teacher if I were angry that not that I know if I'm a great teacher, but I presume I'm decent, if I wasn't also out there doing it, because I think I would feel angry that one was taking away from the other. Let's see what other questions.
No, but that's a good point too. Like, I'm always so happy when my students succeed, but I feel like if I hadn't written, it might be a different story. But I did see someone asked, what's the difference? And this is the thing we both can answer. What's the difference between writing screenplay and writing a book?
Money.
No, I feel like I learned a lot. So I wrote Chang and Ang as a book, and then I wrote it as a screenplay, and I feel like that was super helpful, because in a book you can kind of screw around a little bit, and in the screenplay it was like everything has to serve the story.
Right.
And I think that even in literary fiction, that's really a useful skill. And then when I think that, when I went back to write books, I feel like I had a more concrete understanding of what moves the story forward.
Right.
And now I'm writing a screenplay. I don't know if it'll happen. As you know, these things often go far and don't get all the way, but I'm writing a screenplay now for Half a Life as a movie. And that's been interesting too, because that is like, not only is it a book I wrote, but it's my life. So having to make the changes there has been tough. It's a very painful story, the memoir. So I told the director that if I'm lucky enough to get it made, I won't see the movie, but I'll write the script.
And also that you have to have someone much better looking than yourself play you. So it's less painful. I have a friend who, before she sold her memoir, an agent read it and said, I don't really like the main character. And she was like, it's a memoir. She's like, yeah, I know.
It's a tough racket, man.
I can't imagine fictionalizing your memoir into a screenplay, essentially, where when Harry Styles plays Darin Strauss,
Everyone just keeps talking about how handsome he is in this. Why is
with beautiful hair? It'd been a long time since I'd written any screenplays, like 15 years or something. And I really just spent the last 6 months working on a bunch, because I am sort of thinking about where the next portion of my career is going to go, and what I want to do, and some dominion I want over adaptations of some of my own work. I've been lucky in that I've sold a lot of my stuff to be made. And it just doesn't get made, which is, that's like 99.9% of stuff. But what I found is that I really love streaming television, essentially, like the model that exists now of not adapting a book into a 2-hour movie, but adapting it into 9 episodes.
Yeah.
That's how I want to write television. I don't want to adapt my 500-page book into an hour and 45 minutes. I want to adapt it into 8 hours. I want to really be able to dive into it. And the thing that really inspired me from that, or inspired me creatively, is looking at a show like The Wire, which was writing essentially streaming television before streaming television. Turning a broad, multi-character, multi-point of view story into cable television, using all the things that we now find addictive about, limited run series on Netflix or Amazon or whatever. And so it's been really great for me these last several months working on the adaptation of my own book, and then adapting some stories of mine and some other things, just so that we're going to go out with them shortly. But writing books is hard. It's hard on your body. It's hard on your head. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of thought. screenplays are a lot shorter, Darin. I don't know if you've heard.
It's so much easier. You have to worry. All you got to worry about is the story and the dialogue. You have to worry about it, and it's like you can do it in 3 months as opposed to 3 years.
Right. Exactly. But I've really started to enjoy the process. I used to not really like screenplays, but in the last year or two, I've really found myself loving the form a lot more and enjoying writing it a lot more as well.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Let's see if we can find another fantastic question. Ezra does say, there's nothing quite like the satisfaction of succeeding out of spite. That is correct, Ezra. Here's a good question. This is from Noah. Is there ever a sort of panic moment when someone is able to accurately guess where it's going as you're writing? Does that make you feel the need to change direction, or does it mean you're doing something right? That's a really good question. I'll give you a piece of advice that I got, Noah, which is a great crime writer named Donald Westlake. I was a huge fan, and he was essentially like my YA literature when I was growing up. I read all of his Hitman books when I was 13. I got a chance to spend some time with him, and all I did was ask him questions like he was Yoda. And he was very nice and answered all of them. And he always has great endings, and I'm crap with endings, both creatively and interpersonally. And I said to him, how do you know when a story is over or when your book is over? And he said, I know when what I'm writing is over when the reader could write the next page. And that's that realization, to go to your question, Noah. If they can accurately predict what's going to happen next, then you're done. And if that means you're done on page 2, that means you don't have a good idea, but if you're done on page 300, that means you've got a pretty kick-ass book. And that has been sort of my guiding principle now for 20 years of writing, is always keep the reader surprised. And if the reader is out of surprises, then your story is done. That's
really great advice. Although I do wonder, do you ever feel like maybe that puts too much pressure on you to surprise? I mean, because sometimes stories go where they're expected and it's done so well that it's okay. I mean, I'm thinking of like bad movies, like with surprise endings where you're like, they just want to surprise us. They're not even thinking about
right. M. Night Shyamalan.
I did get to meet a few heroes, but not like that. That must have been really cool. Cool. I loved Martin Amis, and I twice hosted him at reading, and that was really cool. Although it was really funny. It was like a scene from an Amos book. I have twins, and he's written about twins in the information, and our babysitting fell through, so I had to take the twins with me to the reading, and I sat them stupidly in the front, and I said, you can watch a movie in headphones and just be quiet. And they watched the comedy, so they laughed the entire time and just left the reading. And Amos was like, whose children was that? And I was like, he did get a kick out of that, though.
Oh gosh.
I'm gonna walk and talk because I've got to get a plug. I forgot to get a plug. So
all right. We got time for one more question and a tour of Darin's mom's house. So that will be nice. Let's see here.
Where is
one sec. We're looking for a question. A lot of great quotes from me, I see on the comments.
Not so many from me. Interesting.
What is your ideal space to sit down and write to be free of distractions? Oh, a nice little process question from Jordan. My ideal space is literally right here. When we're done with this, I'm going to take off this button-down shirt, put the Jason Isbell tour shirt I had on earlier back on, turn to face the large screen, and get to work.
Well, yeah, good. You're gonna work after this. That's pretty good.
Or I'll go to Trader Joe's. Those are my two choices.
Work or pie.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I just found that having twins, and my wife is also a writer, and so she's home. So I found I can't be too precious about where I write. So I've gotten pretty good at writing with music, although I actually just like writing with music anyway. A friend of mine, the writer Rich Cohen, says, if you write with music, you can have a little party every day. Why would you not do that? So I can put headphones on and write in a cafe or on my bed or anywhere. I feel like
stranger's bed. I break into apartments and write in people's homes.
To me, the real thing is being jealous of the time, not the space.
Right.
So like, having to carve out time is hard enough. So then if I can say, all right, I'm going to have 3 hours to do this, then that's more important than where. So I do try. I mean, I love the story of John Cheever. So Cheever wanted to think about writing like a real job. So he said, and he lived in Manhattan in the 50s. So he would get up at 8 a.m., put on a suit and tie, grab a briefcase, go downstairs, hang out at the coffee shop with all the commuters, and then when they went on the subway, he went back home, took his tie off, and then started writing. But he felt like he had to be a commuter. So I try to do it like that. If I'm not teaching that day, I'll try to say, okay, I'm going to write from 9 to 5 today. Right. But I was kind of a crappy 9 to 5 worker, so I've done a lot of internet. Right. Like you, I spend too much time on social media, so there's a lot of Twitter. For me, it's more Twitter than Facebook, I think. But so I take a lot of breaks, but I'll say from 9 to 5 I'll write, and that usually means like 4 solid hours of writing in that 8 hours,
See, if I treated writing like any 9 to 5 job I'd had previous to my writing career, what that would mean is I would say that I had a meeting, I would go home, I would nap for 4 hours, and I would come back to the office in a wrinkled suit. So,
no wonder those infomercials were no good.
Right. But actually, that's not so terribly different than a decent writing day.
Exactly.
Like, honey, I'm going to write. I have a chair over there that I read in, and it's way too comfortable, and it's overstuffed, and it's like the chair I read in to immediately begin drooling at myself.
Well, I'm sleeping. That's just from
Yeah, that's actually I'm just a drooler. Well, I think that is our allotment of time. Ladies and gentlemen, Darin Strauss' brand new book, Queen of Tuesday, out right now. You should go buy it. It's awesome. I absolutely loved it.
And when is your book is out in February?
Yes, February 2nd. If we make it there alive, the Low Desert will be out. I'd appreciate it if you could all buy 10 to 20 copies, like just for Hanukkah as a pre-order. It's good for the Jews.
But yes,
what Darin and I are, incidentally.
You see that? Did you guys? Oh.